Welcome to Laughter's the Best Medicine.
This is a great one. Today, our guest, a three-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, Robert F. Kennedy, Human Rights Journalism Award winner, Today Show West Coast anchor, and Dateline correspondent. It's both of our friends, Natalie Morales.
Matt, I know we're really looking forward to speaking to Natalie today, not only because of her remarkable career in life, but also because she's the person who introduced us a few years ago.
That's right. I honestly think she deserves credit for this podcast, Susie.
I think so. But seriously, Natalie's someone who truly inspires me. She's not only a brilliant award winning journalist, but also someone who genuinely wants to make a positive impact in the world. She's turned every transition into an opportunity to grow and expand in her career, and she's really unstoppable.
Speaking of unstoppable, I think she's done 5 marathons.
Yes.
And she's doing triathlons too. Honestly, I'm like, Natalie, have a brownie and take a nap. Do it, dude. You're making me feel bad.
I'm so looking forward to turning the tables on Natalie today.
As am I. So without further ado, here is Natalie Morales. First of all, thank you for joining us. Susie and I have just been raving about you and how incredible you are. But before we get into it, the podcast is called Laughter is the Best Medicine. So The first thing I want to ask you is, what was the last big laugh you had?
I was with a couple of girlfriends last night, and hanging out with them is always a good time. And we took a picture, and it looked like I spliced like my leg on my other leg, my friend's other leg. So the picture looks ridiculous. And so we were all laughing.
Now we're dying to see the photo. Natalie, we'll have to go check out your
it's
Instagram.
funny. I mean, it is funny. It looks kind of raunchy, but it's when you realize it's not my leg, it's good.
And on another laughter note, I think it's hilarious that you get confused with Natalie Morales, the actress, all the time.
Oh my gosh. I feel so bad for her. I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit older, so I can claim the name first. But she's a real trooper about it. It's funny. I've actually met her. She was in the movie, what was it, Battle of the Sexes, and she played one of the tennis stars along with like Steve Carell, and Billie Jean King, played by Emma Stone. And so I was on a junket getting ready to interview Steve Carell, and out walks Natalie Morales out of the elevator, the Cuban Natalie Morales. I'm the Puerto Rican Natalie Morales. So I'm like, we both do a double take, because people actually think we look alike too. I've had people think that, when they show up to do my makeup or something, like, you look so different than the person I saw in the picture. She was really wearing this, like, you were wearing like something super sexy, and there I am in like my corporate suit. And I'm like, no, that's not me. No. I can't tell you the last time I took a sexy picture.
But yeah. What a journey you've had. You're born in Taiwan. You grew up in Brazil, Spain, Panama. Your mom's Brazilian. Your father's Puerto Rican, in the military. How did these early years, how did that shape you?
Well, my dad was, career Air Force. So I was born in Taiwan because he was serving during the Vietnam War at the time. And he was able to bring my mom and be based there. And every 2 to 3 years, we'd pick up and move to a different location. So I think in the first 18 years of my life, I lived in 7 or 8 different places, including moving between my junior and senior year from Madrid, Spain to Dover, Delaware, which was a real like, whoa, here we go. That was a shock to the system. But I mean, as you know, I think, Matt, this is one of those cases where it's prepared me so well as a journalist, because you learn how to be, really good with people, how to really listen, how to think fast, how to adjust and adapt to any situation. And I actually loved the opportunity and the challenge of a move, because I knew I was going to make new friends. I was going to go to a new and exciting a great new place. And, I thrived in that environment. But my older sister, I think when she got into like her freshman year in high school and was captain of the cheerleading squad and the whole thing, I think she was a little more pissed off by it, can we say? She was not having any of it.
So you talk about the influence the military lifestyle had on you. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the early life lessons that you learned that made you the woman and the journalist you are today?
Yeah, I think it really shaped my curiosity. Just living in Panama, Brazil, Spain, places where, especially, getting to see a real mix of people and the cultural diversity and the richness of the cultures, and being Puerto Rican and Brazilian, being able to, infuse myself in the cultures and the languages of, what were some of my background and my heritage. but also like being in areas where things were happening, around the world. And, Brazil, was going through great corruption in the government, and it is again, and it continues to always be. But like just being able to witness these things as a young girl growing up. I remember being in Panama, in the Panama Canal Zone. That's where my little sister was born. My dad was stationed there. And President Jimmy Carter at the time was coming to the Canal Zone for the Canal Zone Treaty signing. And I shook his hand, and I actually have that picture. And, at the time, not really understanding, but I remember seeing, when the president's plane landed and seeing him walk off the plane and then him coming over to greet a couple of us, thinking like, oh my gosh, that's the president of the United States. So being able to be around sort of historic events as well, I think shaped me as a journalist. It made me more curious, and just, knowing that there was a greater, much bigger world out there that I needed to be a part of.
The curiosity's obvious with you, but what really strikes me is what you just did. That was a fascinating story you just told about meeting the president, Jimmy Carter. And Susie and I were talking about, I think, entertainment is storytelling, but journalism truly is. The reason we care is not an event. It comes down to the stories. And that's something that you've done so well. So where do you think your love or your ability to really tell a great story, where did that come from?
I think that started off I think when you're that child who's always the new kid in the classroom and you have to make friends. And, I think from that moment, you learn how to talk to people, how to listen to people, and then to be able to tell your own story. So it starts there, and it starts with that, being curious about other people. But really it was in high school, I would say, when I started, writing and creative writing. And even I remember one of my history teachers at the time, Mr. Craig, he was like, you're a really great writer. Have you ever thought about writing as a career? And I was like, I didn't really think about that. And then later, my junior year, I was the class president, and I got up and gave a speech. And my friend's mom said to me, wow, you're really good in front of people. Have you ever thought about being a journalist? And then I kind of put it all together, a career where I can write, where I can travel, where I can experience cultures, talk to people, and witness incredibly exciting, sometimes really tragic events as well. But to not be tied to a desk and to be out there and be creative and to be feeling also that I'm making a difference in some way, that was a career that I needed to be a part of.
What do you think, as you look for a story, what do you think the key to a great story is? What do you look for when you're thinking of a story to tell?
Great characters, always. I mean, it all comes down to, are they relatable? Are these people telling a story that's real, that's genuine, authentic to all of us? Like, is it something I connect with? And then, also being able to listen really well as a storyteller. I mean, the number one thing as an interviewer, as you guys know, is being able to like take it all in and take yourself out of it sometimes and just, sit back, let them tell their story with all the pauses and the breaths and whatever they need. Because, I find sometimes when I'm watching an interview and people keep interrupting, like, wait, they were getting to the good point. Just wait, back off. So that's something actually with Dateline, which is really great. It has allowed me to breathe a little bit more because we're so used to live television at the Today Shows. Matt has been on many times. You get like 3 or 4 minutes and it's like, okay, and that's a wrap. You're like, wait, I was just getting started. So it's nice now with Dateline. I get to breathe a little bit more, get to really listen to people and not feel like I'm pressuring them to give me the answer in the 30 seconds that I have left.
And I'm wondering what the biggest challenges you faced as a woman in this business starting out. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I came into this business in the 90s in New York City. So we all know what the 90s in New York City were like, making no money. So that was a challenge in itself, coming up in a field where there were a lot of great women in front of the camera at the time, but not a lot of diversity in front of the camera. But that said, it was also a time where I think women have really had to work extra hard to make their mark. And there were always questions about appearance and, if you didn't look the part, and that's not something a man is judged on. And then of course, your skills shine, but if you're too attractive. Well, maybe she's not as smart as she should be, So it's amazing the critiques and the criticism I think that women had to deal with early on. And then, also starting a family in early 2003. I mean, I think it was a very different newsroom back then. I mean, I, had a C-section and like was expected to be back on the air like 8 weeks later. I was right back in that chair. Whereas now there's much greater understanding of the need for maternity leave and allowing people to heal, allowing their babies to bond with them. So I feel like what I've seen within the growth at our own network, as Matt knows with NBC, is that women have really risen to the occasion. And now a lot of the top jobs are occupied by women, which was something that I did not experience coming up. It was a lot of men making the decisions for a show that was largely watched by women. So it's been an interesting turnaround of events, and it's, high time that women were in those positions.
Do you think your upbringing had any influence on sort of your ability to sort of push through those uncomfortable times for you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it is sink or swim. And that's what I learned as a military brat growing up. It was like any new place I went to, it's like if I knew I wanted to be accepted and I wanted to belong, I had to like right away ingratiate myself, learn the culture. What's the corporate culture? It's the same thing in the working world. You have to kind of feel the room and figure out where you belong and how you fit in, how you navigate even other women, because sometimes women with women can be, especially in our business, Matt, can be very competitive on television. So you have to learn how to, work the room, so to speak.
Well, that's something I think, and we've seen the fictionalized glimpse of this with the morning show on Apple TV. But that is one of the things that I don't know that people appreciate, but that daytime television, particularly when you're at the Today Show, that show really is the crown jewel in NBC's empire. When you think it is multiple hours, it is one of the things that draws viewers. But talk about the pressure of being at a place like that, particularly when especially it's supposed to be this wonderful convivial morning show, but people are gunning for spots. The pressure is high.
Yeah.
What is it like surviving in an environment like that?
I'm glad that I never thought of it that way. Thanks, Matt. Whoa. But certainly there was the pressure, like anytime I got a chance to fill in at the anchor desk, and anytime obviously just being there, being a part of the show and knowing you're part of this incredible ensemble team, it's a badge of honor. And, I never envisioned that I would be sitting there in any capacity. I thought I was going to be a local news girl. I was in Hartford, Connecticut, and then worked my way to MSNBC. And I thought, okay, I'm in the big leagues. I'm, on cable TV now. I never envisioned that. Although, I think there were people who said, someday you're going to be on the Today Show. And I was like, what are you talking about? I never took that seriously. But it's funny, like the minute you get there and you arrive and you hear that music, and then you just kind of forget and you just have to go into autopilot and do what you're trained to do. There are days when I have a really tough interview where the pressure, you feel it, where you don't sleep the night before and have anxiety right before. But I think the great thing is it was such a good family and a great team that you knew everybody had your back. At the end of the day, like everybody's there to make you look good. The producers are there to help you shine. They're giving you the kinds of information and research that you need in order to be able to go do your interview the best you can. Fortunately, as that military brat, I swam, I didn't sink.
And you brought up family. So can we talk about Joe for a moment?
Susie knows Joe very well.
You had this incredible partnership for the past 22 years.
Yeah.
And what always strikes me about your relationship is just your ability to champion one another. And I'm wondering if you can take us back to the beginning of your career and what that experience was like with Joe.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like one of my first big job offers, I had an opportunity going from News 12 the Bronx, because I was like local cable news girl, News 12 the Bronx, to either go to KUSA in Denver, which was like the #1 NBC station in Denver. And it's an incredible shop. And my heart was set on it, or going to Hartford, Connecticut. And that was a decision that Joe and we both kind of like laid out our decks. And I'm like, Joe, I would love to go to Denver. And I remember crying over this because he was like, but he's in finance and in private equity. And at the time, there wasn't much of that happening there. He was like, there's not a job for me there. I don't know what I would do and how I would get my footing there. So we had to really kind of lay out all our cards and look at the pros and cons. And we decided, okay, well, I've got this great opportunity in Hartford, which is, a wonderful owned and operated network by NBC, which means like people in Connecticut are watching, anybody from the network most likely will, if they live in Connecticut, they can see me, but also like I get an opportunity to possibly fill in at the network, which I ended up doing. And that's kind of how the Today Show came about for me. It was just being in that role of being able to fill in on CNBC a couple of times, reading the news headlines, to then making my way eventually to MSNBC. So it actually was the perfect move, but Joe and I had to come to that decision together, and it pained us both because we both knew the lifestyle in Denver probably was going to be amazing. But instead, he was commuting an hour into the city to go to his job, and I was commuting and driving an hour north to go to Hartford, Connecticut. And it was the best time ever. I loved being in Hartford. It's still, I consider Hartford sort of home to me because it was my first major market as the morning anchor. And you just have a forever love for the people there because the way they embraced and accepted me. But Joe has always been a champion, and he has always, whatever, when it came to my career, whatever was best, including my latest move to California 5 years ago, he was like, okay, let's go. We had always talked about coming out to Los Angeles, and this opportunity sort of presented itself at the right time. My kids were at the right point in their lives where I felt like, they need to be challenged in a different way and need to experience other things too, because I knew how beneficial that was for me. So always my number one fan club is Joe.
Well, we're fans of Joe. Joe actually took me out golfing once, so I'm glad you guys are in LA. I was in Denver, but Hartford was definitely the right move for you based on the unbelievable career you've had. And one of the things, you won the Robert F. Kennedy Journalism Award, one of the most prestigious awards you can receive as a journalist. So tell us about the story you covered, and for you, what made it so powerful.
Yeah, I think that one was really powerful. I did that story for, then it was Rock Center. And it was kind of like our 60 Minutes at NBC. And what I loved about, the story there is it was about lobster divers along the Mosquito Coast, which is the coastline between Honduras and Nicaragua. And what a lot of people don't realize is the fish that we're eating, if you get fish from Costco or whatever, your lobster, a lot of it comes from that region, especially those spiny tail Caribbean lobsters. They come from that area. And these divers, the sacrifice that they're making to bring that lobster to your dinner plate is incredibly tragic. They are diving with equipment that is barely functional. They don't have pressurized, the properly pressurized tanks. So they're coming out of the water and they're like making, of course, because they earn their money based on the amount of lobsters that they fish out of the sea. So if there's one more lobster to grab, they're going to get it because that's another dollar to them. And so there goes Joe, by the way.
Hi, Joe.
There goes my fan club. He's so oblivious to it all. So anyway, back to the story. What really struck me about telling this story is that a lot of people don't realize, again, this is sort of that, the journalism that impacts you, because this is something that it's, we hear a lot about sustainable farming and, when it comes to the oceans, we don't think about the human cost. You're thinking about the cost of, the fish or what is it doing depleting the oceans. Here on the other side of it was this other story that is barely told about these poor guys coming back up with the bends. And fortunately, there was a doctor there on the island that was so motivated to save them that he had these depressurization tanks that if they got to him soon enough, that it would help cure the bends, not 100%, but like 80%. But anyway, like being on that little remote part of the world and I've lived in places where I've seen a lot of poverty in Brazil and Panama. this took my breath away. Little babies, I told Susie this, newborn babies are wrapped in newspapers because they don't have baby blankets in the hospitals. That tells you how impoverished this part of the world is. And so, because the situation is so drastic there with these lobster divers, and that's their only way to make an honest living rather than the drug trade, which is also very prevalent there, they end up coming back with the bends and paralysis. And if they don't get treated by this one incredible doctor with this one depressurization tank, they will end up paralyzed. So, walking around this really muddy kind of jungly mosquito coast area, you see these poor guys, they can't even have like real wheelchairs because the conditions don't really allow for it. And they also can't afford it. So they have these carts. They're like trolley carts that they've outfitted with these wooden wheels, and you see them all over the place. And it just takes your breath away when you see something like that. And you realize the power of the storytelling and being able to communicate to people the human impact. And as a result of that report, the Kennedy Foundation and Ethel Kennedy in particular, at the time, she called me and said, we are going to donate so that they can get more wheelchairs to those areas of the wheelchair carts. And we're getting them shoes and clothing. Nike helped send some clothing and much needed shoes. And so it made me feel good. Like, it's when you realize the impact of your words and your reporting actually made a real difference.
Yeah. And what a remarkable, powerful story to share with people, to really see that they can make different decisions that can impact people too as well.
Not to say that you shouldn't eat those lobsters, because then that wipes out the industry altogether. But
we don't often want to know where our food comes from.
I know.
It's amazing when you really look at it and understand the cost that goes into it. And maybe it allows people to make more informed choices.
Yeah, exactly. You just hope people think about where things come from, and that's the opportunity to really look into and research it yourself
and make those decisions.
Yeah.
You've covered so many amazing stories throughout your career, and we've spoken personally about one of your favorite stories being the Chilean miner rescue. Can you tell us a little bit about why that particular story impacted you so much?
Well, that was incredible. Because I was able to travel to Chile early on. Once we knew they were alive, the executive producer of the Today Show said, well, let's think about sending you there. We didn't know how they were going to get them out of the ground yet, but I was like, okay, let me go and start laying the groundwork and start meeting the people who are there at the campsite, because it was all the families. They were there for over, 59 days waiting for their loved ones. And so I got to know them. And as we started to see people arrive and the rescue teams start to arrive and start developing the plans, including the engineering teams, I went back I think it was about 2 weeks out before the actual rescue, and happened to meet the American engineering team from Pennsylvania who helped build the capsule that would go in the drill bit that would go down into the ground to then rescue the miners. And what I love about that story is that it was such an incredible opportunity. First, tell a good news story, which a lot of people in our business, we don't get to tell a lot of those. This was a story that was watched by 1 billion people in the actual, the 24 to 48 hour window of those rescues. People were watching all over the world. But it was also the extraordinary efforts of the world's best engineers, the world's best minds, mathematicians. How do we get, this to go into there, and how do we get these guys out? It was Americans. There was a team from South Africa. It was incredible to see. It was like, which drill bit is going to work? It was like a competition, almost like, are the Americans are in first place. It really became one of those stories where you're like, every little moment was celebrated. And then, the drill bit hit something. Now we got to remove the drill bit. It's going to be delayed. There was so much drama in the storytelling. So, and also being able to speak Spanish and communicating with the families, like to hear their frustrations, but also to be able to celebrate with them and then cry with them when their loved ones are finally rescued. And all 32 survived, which, that was a miracle. Nobody ever thought that would be the outcome of that story. So I still get chills when I think about that, and just being there that night. Me and Carrie Sanders, in fact, we were up all night, like in these sleeping bags, watching it. Like, is if we could have had a bag of popcorn. We're like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe that I get to be here and to witness this. That was that feeling and that excitement. Kind of like when you see somebody climb up the warped wall and like hit the thing.
Wow.
I was like, yeah.
No, you know what? Honestly, what it
Yeah.
reminds me of is it's a story, and like you said, fortunately, it had a great outcome. But it
Yeah.
reminds me of the Olympics. It reminds me of
Yeah.
moments, right? And the
Right.
same thing with the Olympics, where the other reason we care is the stories that when you start to hear these aren't just faceless minors, you're with the family, and this guy
Yeah.
has 3 kids that are hoping their father comes home for this, and to me, like you said, it is such a privilege anytime you get to witness something. I mean, and that is hopefully a once in a lifetime experience to go through something that could have been so tragic and had such a good outcome. But on a
Yeah.
regular basis, you've gone to the Olympics, I think since 2004. You're going
Yeah.
again to Tokyo. It'll be your 7th Olympics.
7. You'll be there too, right?
Yes, yeah, and I can't wait because
Yes.
to me, it's again, it's the story of a lifetime of work for a moment, and what
Yeah.
for you when you're at the Olympics? What stands out for you, Natalie?
It's always the athlete stories, and I love especially the come from behind story of
Yeah.
or the outcome you never expected. I mean, I think those are the moments that I know that the Olympians live for, when their dream becomes a reality. As you said, they work so hard for this one shot. Like all the other times, how often are we sitting there watching the swimming competitions? We aren't really. I would love to be able to tune in and watch. You can watch it on the NBC Olympic Channel, the highlights over and over again.
Or the Peacock NBC
or the
streaming
Peacock.
app.
Yes, let's plug everything while we can.
Contractually obligated, right, Natalie?
No, but I mean, that's what's great is that, in fact, I've been now, because Olympic trials are underway and stuff, I've been glued because it is so fascinating. Like even seeing like Laura Wilkinson, she retired 13 years ago, the US gold medal diver, and she has an opportunity. She retired 13 years ago, has had 4 children in the meantime. She's been very busy, but she's on this huge comeback and potentially could be there. So that's what's really cool is when you have like, Allison Felix had a baby and to be able to come back and still dominate in her sport, but then you've got the people like Simone Biles who continue to defy anything that anybody has ever seen in gymnastics. And it's funny because I met Simone when she was just like a wee little thing, although she's still a wee little thing.
4'8".
But she was, yes,
So tiny.
She was even more wee than that. No, I met her at the ranch early on when she was first competing, and was able to do some interviews with her, and everybody kept talking about her and saying she's like the flying squirrel on the beams. You have to see her. And I was like, okay. And then when I saw her, I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is going places. Boy, did she ever. Yeah. So those are the stories that, I mean, I think, we all, even like last Olympics in Pyeongchang, Shaun White and his incredible run, the half pipe, I still gave me chills, and it still does.
The stakes are so high, the emotions are so real, and to see, especially because for most of them, this is it. There isn't some professional contract, maybe a sponsorship. But the other thing I love are watching the families and seeing the parents who've put so much into this themselves, and to see that the joy. I always think it's a privilege. So
it is such a privilege to tell their stories. Wow.
So over the years, you've covered so many incredibly challenging stories, from 9/11 to school shootings to natural disasters. And I'm curious about what your mindset's like when you have to be covering these really catastrophic and sad stories.
That's always the hardest part of our jobs, I think. I remember going to Sandy Hook. I guess it was the second day after the shooting, and this was near Christmas time, and seeing the little angels that the town had put up representing each child that was lost in that shooting. And at the time, my oldest son, I believe, was going into either first grade or second grade, so very close in age to those kids. And I could barely get the words out. And that's the hard part is, you relate, that you have a responsibility, though, to be able to tell their stories with dignity and honor and to do right by the families. But at the same time, as a mom myself and feeling, what that loss would be like. And of course I could never feel that because I was not in that position, but just to see that it took it was one of those moments where actually it was interesting because Savannah was anchoring that day and she said, Natalie, I could see on your face, like I was white and I was just very like, it was hard. It was a very hard day. And I remember going home and just hugging my son, Josh, and just, being so grateful and thankful. But, also knowing that that's the job that I have to do is I have to go to work and I have to be able to turn around and then be a good mom and put a smile on my face. So some days you just kind of have to go lay in your bed for a little bit, recover a little bit, get up, and then go be with the family. Even after the 9/11, after 9/11, I was covering that the 6-month anniversary for MSNBC and talking to family members all day. And it got to a point where it was still very raw and still very emotional. And, you never get over those moments and you just learn how to, do your job, go home, and then try to be the mom that you need to be, or go take a nap and get up and be better, in a little bit. So sometimes I do have to take a time out. Moms do too.
I think moms especially do. I mean, I can imagine
We
my
have to take
mom putting up with me must have needed a lot of timeouts.
Yeah.
But I know you also, you're an athletic machine. Susie and I have both commented on it and seen it firsthand. You've come out to American Ninja Warrior where you were a bulldog. You would not stop. You got the shot and you're like, I'm going for the warp wall again. I'm going up here. I'm going up these obstacles.
Could never make it. Matt never made it up the wall. I never did it.
Neither have I.
Well, my husband on the second try went, whoop, you mean that wall? Like, whoop.
I always feel people like that, I call them rude for doing it so easily. But you do triathlons, marathons.
That's my therapy.
So is that it? Where did it come from? Because that is, you're such a hard worker. And I could just picture you like grabbing a martini sitting on the couch, but instead you're out pounding on the pavement. So is that what it is for you? Is it really therapeutic, like to get this?
It is.
Talk about some of that, just a catharsis, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I discovered running in high school, and I found it was like the greatest outlet to just be in my thoughts. And in the beginning, when I first started running, I wouldn't even. Back then, you couldn't really run with a Walkman, or you didn't really have. Back in high, there's the Sony Sport Walkman.
I still have mine.
Yeah. You still have? It's probably back there in your toys somewhere.
He has the tapes too. He has all the tapes from the 80s.
Mixed tapes?
Yes.
Oh, the one the girlfriend gave you in high school? I think you get that one.
I do. Sealed with a kiss. That's what she called it.
Nice. Oh my gosh. The best. But running, I discovered early in high school, like that was my outlet. And I didn't ever really, I played a lot of sports in high school, soccer including, which is a lot of running, but like running just for the get out and run and be in my thoughts. That was my number one way to de-stress and to just sort out my thoughts. And then, I started doing marathons and half marathons and started thinking, okay, well, maybe I should challenge myself a little bit. When I moved to New York, I was like, I think it was 1994. I'm like, I'm going to do the New York City Marathon, never knowing first how hard it is to get into the New York City Marathon, but then also like having to put the work into doing that. And I was just addicted. And from then on, I've always been a competitor. I think that's my nature, type A, that's who we are. And I don't like defeat. So I always have to challenge myself in new ways, find things that I enjoy doing as an outlet.
I can imagine too that there's a really high burnout rate for journalists. Oh. And so it sounds like this is just a great way for you to switch it off and transition. And you have a new horse too. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So my new passion is horseback riding. And I have a horse named Houdini. As my husband says, he makes our money disappear. But it was something that was always a dream of mine. And I remember, as a kid, always saying to my dad, for my 10th birthday, I really want a horse. But of course, as a kid, moving and living on military bases often or moving around, it's not practical. Having a dog was hard enough. So never got a horse except for those little plastic Barbie horses and, or My Little Pony was as close as I got. And, you know, finally being settled in LA, my neighbor, who Susie knows as well, she's our neighbor, got me into horseback riding. She said, come to this stable with me and see what you think. And fell in love, started doing it regularly now. And now that is my new thing. And it's challenging too. I mean, you're on a 2,500-pound animal with a will of its own. And let me tell you, they are, you know, they're the kind of animal that there is, and Susie knows this, when it comes to therapy, you know, animals can give us so much. This horse can feel everything. Whatever I'm feeling, it knows if I'm having a good day or a bad day. When you're sitting on it, it knows. So be careful. If you're having a not good day, it knows, and it internalizes that as well. And
my mom is a horse. She grew up in Nebraska in a small town, has had a horse her entire life, and still rides 5 days a week. And she said, it's the only way I could put up with you, your brother, and your father was to have my time on the horse. And for her, it is just what you said, that that therapy, that connecting with nature, and that thing of you have to be present when you're on an animal with its own
absolutely mind. Every moment, like, you've got to be on that saddle, knowing what you're doing. It feels it. And, you know, my dogs are huge therapy too, my 2 dogs. So I mean, you find ways to your outlets in many different ways, but I feel like animals and my, you know, extracurricular running and riding have been great for me.
Another one of your passions we want to bring up is you're a fantastic cook, and we've been fortunate both to have actually had wonderful Natalie Morales meals at your house.
Aww.
And you have a cookbook out, Home with Natalie, as well. I'm wondering, do you have favorite recipes or things that you really love to cook? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
I have a lot of different recipes that, you know, because I grew up in so many different places, I would say anything that uses lots of spice and the spice of life. That's what I like. So a lot of, I cook more, I want to say Mediterranean style, because I lived in Spain when I was 12 to 17. So a lot of tapas, a lot of, using olive oil and garlic and certain seasoning, saffron and parsley and spices from those areas. But I think having lived in so many different places, and also having been to Puerto Rico many, many summers, and having my, Puerto Rican grandmother show me how to make Puerto Rican dishes, and my mom with her own Brazilian cooking, I've through osmosis picked up a lot of the recipes that are more global in nature. So I would say there's no one single recipe that is my favorite, just because I do have so many different favorite things that I love to make. Now the question is, what are the favorites that my kids like? I mean, they're very simple. It's chicken and rice. I mean, it's as boring as it gets. Anything chicken and rice, they love. So that's the specialty.
But that's where the spices come in to make it unique.
It's true, but they like it plain and bland. They're kids, they're teenagers, so teenagers are like, boring.
Boring.
I'm wondering if you have any cooking projects coming up too in your future.
Not right now, I will say. Dateline is keeping me busy, and I'm traveling quite a bit. So,
Natalie, Susie was essentially saying, when are you inviting us over for our
cooking? Well, there is that too.
That was what she was getting at there.
Yes, we need to get you guys back over here for sure. Name your day. You tell me when you're available. Now you're the one with the busy schedule.
The thing that amazes me, Natalie, is you've had an incredible career, and it's still growing. It's expanding. You seem to be able to reinvent yourself whenever you have to. But I'm curious, as you said, you learn a lot in this business. Yeah. What advice, or what's the best advice that you would give your younger self, or obviously to someone else who may be starting out in the business? What's the hardest learned lesson or thing you'd like to share?
Well, I think the greatest lesson is really just enjoy all the change and enjoy the ride, because as we know, Matt, in our business, nothing is permanent. And Susie, as you know, in life, nothing is permanent. Situations change, families change. Your job is going to change a lot. We're not in those careers anymore, I think, where people start out in one job and are there to the day they retire and then, get a pension. That's not what we do anymore. People move around quite a bit. And hopefully if you're privileged, you have many different careers in your life. If you have a lot of different passions, maybe you find a way to make that your job in many different ways. So I've been lucky that, I guess this is my second act, because my first act was in banking for a couple of years. And that was not my favorite job, but I learned a lot. And yeah, I would say to my younger self, and I always say this to interns when I get a chance to kind of talk to them, and it's really just go with your heart and go with your gut. If you feel like there's an opportunity that's going to be really great for you to grow, and things will be challenging. And yes, sometimes it doesn't work out. I've found that many times in my career where things don't end up the way you wanted them to go. But hopefully you've kept the door open enough to another opportunity. So then you can find a new path. And I think you just have to always keep reinventing. The day you stop reinventing yourself, or stop learning something new, or stop, trying, is the day you're no longer on this earth.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I really love about you so much, is just your ability to lead with your heart, but also just your ability to constantly challenging yourself and expanding, which I feel like everyone that surrounds you feels that, and they grow with you too as well.
Oh, thank you, Susie. She's a good friend, isn't she, Nat?
She is I described angel. That's how I describe Susie.
Yeah, she is. She is. Thank goodness we have her in our lives.
The end of each episode, we love to ask a few questions, a few rapid fire questions, and I'm wondering if you're game.
Yes, go for it.
All right. We call these rapid fire, but we are learning they may not be, they're sometimes thought provoking, but
There's
anyway.
a warped wall at the end of this.
Yes.
This is it, Natalie. Our 5-question warped wall. So here it is. If you could interview anyone, alive or dead, who would it be? Why? And what would be the one question you'd most want to ask?
That's a really good question. Alive or dead? See, the dead. Now you threw me. That's where I'm like, because I would love to go back and talk to historians. I would love to talk to Albert Einstein, and just to know if everything that he envisioned is now what he expected it to be, and what more could he possibly have come up with in his lifetime. And then, on the flip side, I think, it'd be really interesting to do like a big royal interview, sit down with all the royals at once, and to really know what was going on.
Especially right now?
Right now, yes. Yes, I think that's the reality TV show we all want to watch, isn't it?
Well, we know Piers Morgan isn't getting that interview.
No, that's certainly not happening. Yeah, it could be like a therapy session. We get Susie involved there too. I think they need a little bit of that healing. Yeah.
So the second question is, what's your favorite word or saying, and why?
Ooh, my favorite word or saying. You got this, I would say.
Love that.
Yeah, and I think it's because I say that to myself all the time, or I say it to my children all the time. You got this. And there's not enough, I think, self reflection. I think we always put ourselves down, and I think we critique and live in that world where we're thinking, I'm going to mess up, I'm going to fail, So I think the more we can turn the conversation around and psych ourselves up, you got this. I remember when I was training for the Boston Marathon in 2014, and then finally did the marathon, all the signs along, you got this, you got this. And that, like, the whole time, like when I started to really feel it, Heartbreak Hill, I was like, you got this, you got this. So it got me through.
It is amazing, the power of a
Yeah.
mantra. Yeah. On your 100th birthday, what would you like people to say about the life you've lived?
Well, I'm glad you said the birthday, not my death day.
We know how healthy you are.
I don't know if I want to be around till 100, though, unless I'm healthy and sane.
On a later birthday in life.
I would hope that people would say, I think the greatest compliment is she was kind, and she did so much for us. That's all I need to hear, you know? It doesn't matter where it's coming from, if it's coming from my children, if it's coming from my spouse, if it's coming from, you know, my friends, you know, you just want to be appreciated in life. And I think to know that you made a difference in their life.
Well, you definitely have. And you've made a difference in our lives too.
Oh,
So the last question is, if in your career, what's the most embarrassing moment that you've had? Now looking back, it's actually hilarious.
oh my gosh. I have to relive this one over and over again. um, so I was at the news desk, and there was a story on Alzheimer's at the time, and about a new drug that was being tested on the marketplace at the time. And it was published in the journal, was it? Oh, okay. It was published in the Annals of Neurology.
Uh-oh.
What did I say? Yes. I never heard the end of that one. I was like, only I would get my head and my yes, I said the Annals of Neurology.
Oh,
yes, I did. I said that, and then I the minute it came out of my mouth, I was like, oh my gosh, that didn't just happen.
The beauty
and
of
then I remember Al he was like, Natalie, what was that name of that periodical? What was that journal? Like, he kept digging it in. I was like, thanks, Al. You know,
on your 100th birthday, they'll be bringing up that story too.
Yes, yes. I hope that, you know, thank goodness, like a lot of those mistakes in my career were early enough, well before the internet and social media. So, but yeah, that one still exists for sure.
Well, you can blame that on Natalie Morales, the actress.
Yes.
Very good call.
She's cool. I would never do that to her. She's a cool person.
We love you. And I think everyone who's watched this loves you. Where can people find you, Natalie, to learn more about you? And what should they be on the lookout for right now?
Well, you know, always Dateline. I'm, you know, there a lot and working on more stories all the time. And also the Today Show. I'm still there. I'm a fixture, and don't plan to go away anytime soon, and bringing you really interesting interviews and stories. So keep watching. And of course, you know, check out my social media, Instagram at @NMoralesNBC, not to be confused with @Natalie Morales, the actress.
And Natalie, just to close up, Matt and I generally want to say this to you. When we think of you, we think of the Maya Angelou quote: people will forget what you've said, they will forget what you've done, but they'll never forget the way you make people feel. So this is something you truly embody, and we're so happy to have you on today.
Thank you. That's probably my favorite quote. And that's when you said, what do you hope people remember you by at 100? Yeah. That's it. It's how you make people feel. At the end of the day, that's what we all live for, right?
Well, we all said that. I was talking before you came on. I said when I first met you out in San Pedro when you came out for Ninja Warrior, and I immediately just said, I'm a Natalie fan. I absolutely love you. Well, every time I meet you, it reinforces you're an awesome person.
So thank you. And I've always enjoyed anytime. I mean, you've been on the Today Show, or anytime I've been at your set, you've always made me feel like, you know, like I could do it. Like I got this.
You got this.
Even though I never got it up the warped wall.
Next year. I said next year, right?
I'll do the kids ninja warped wall.
Oh my God. Listen, too hard for me. Even at the kids one, Natalie, for me personally now, they say, I've told everyone, if I even look at an obstacle, you have permission to tackle me and say, don't do it. You don't want to go to the hospital. So
I know, I heard you broke your
feet. A foot, broke an ankle. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I used to be an athlete in my own mind. Now it's like, no, you're a host. Stick to it.
And a doctor at that too.
And a doctor, right?
Got a lot going on.
I should know better.
Well, thank you again for your time. We're so grateful.
My pleasure. Great podcast, guys. I love it.
Thank you, Natalie.